The Alpha King married a nobody, but her veil hid a stunning secret. At the heart of it all was the Alpha King, Kale, a man whose power was as absolute as it was feared. Stories of his cold judgments and ruthless decisions traveled faster than the wind, yet behind the stone walls of his palace, the king carried a loneliness that no crown could disguise. It was in this kingdom, on a day heavy with autumn mist, that a strange announcement stirred the court into a quiet frenzy. King Kale, the unyielding ruler of Urendor, would marry. The bride, however, was unlike anyone the nobles had ever seen. She was called Ilara, a nobody of unknown origin, her face hidden behind a delicate veil that shimmered like moonlight. Ilara arrived at the palace with a small entourage, none of whom could claim her family or her wealth. Her steps were measured, her gaze steady, yet she carried a quiet dignity that made even the most haughty courtiers pause. She did not speak loudly, nor did she announce herself. She simply walked, veiled, and the hall seemed to bend to her presence. Kale observed her from the balcony of the grand hall, his dark eyes unreadable. The moment he saw her, he felt a curious tension rise within him, a mixture of caution and intrigue. He had never known anyone so mysterious, so understated, yet undeniably present. The courtiers whispered, trying to guess what secret lay beneath her veil. "You are to remain composed, Ilara," said the palace steward, a kind woman with silver hair. "The king observes all, and Urendor does not forgive mistakes easily." Ilara nodded, her hands folded neatly in front of her. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was soft but clear. "I will do my best." As the wedding day approached, the palace was alive with activity. Servants polished silver, arranged flowers, and prepared the grand hall for the ceremony. Kale, however, remained distant. He moved through the palace like a shadow, silent and watchful. When he did speak, it was to issue commands or correct the decor, but never to engage with the bride. The first time Kale met Ilara alone, it was in the garden of the palace. The garden was a secluded place, where the sound of fountains mingled with the rustle of leaves. Kale approached without announcing himself. "You are different from what I expected," Kale said, his voice low and measured. Ilara turned, her veil hiding her expression, yet her posture was calm. "Different is not always dangerous," she replied, a hint of courage threading through her tone. Kale studied her for a long moment, his sharp eyes searching for any sign of deception. "We shall see," he said finally. "Urendor does not tolerate weakness." Ilara's hands tightened slightly at her sides, but she did not retreat. "And yet, your majesty, strength can wear many faces," she said softly. Something in Kale shifted. He had spent years judging the world by appearances and titles. He had not expected a nobody to speak with such quiet confidence, and yet the mystery of her presence unsettled him. On the day of the wedding, the hall was adorned with banners of deep crimson and gold. Candles lined every wall, their flames flickering like distant stars. Nobles gathered, whispering behind jeweled fans. All eyes were on the veiled bride as she entered the hall, gliding forward with a poise that seemed otherworldly. Kale remained seated upon his throne, the image of calm authority. He watched her approach, noting the slight tremor in her hands. It was a small sign of humanity beneath the composed exterior. The ceremony began. Words were exchanged, promises made, and the air was thick with expectation. Ilara's voice, soft but resolute, carried across the hall. Kale, accustomed to command, listened intently as she repeated the vows. There was honesty in her tone, a sincerity that struck him more deeply than he anticipated. After the ceremony, the hall emptied, leaving only a handful of attendants. Ilara found herself in the private chambers that would now be hers. The room was grand, yet austere, filled with shadows cast by tall windows. She moved to the window, lifting her veil briefly to glance at the moonlit gardens below. Her thoughts were heavy with questions she could not yet answer. A soft knock interrupted her reverie. Kale entered without waiting for an invitation. His presence filled the room like a shadow, and Alara felt both fear and fascination. "You are far braver than I expected," Kale said quietly, pacing the length of the room. "Most would cower at the sight of this palace, at the weight of my rule." Alara met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps," she said, "but courage is not measured by fear alone." Kale stopped, studying her. For the first time, he allowed himself a small, rare curiosity. Who was this woman who could speak with such quiet power and yet reveal nothing? As the night deepened, the silence between them grew thick, not uncomfortable but charged with unspoken thoughts. Kale turned to leave, then hesitated. "Be warned," he said softly. "Erendor does not forgive secrets easily." Alara lowered her veil, hiding her expression once more. "And yet," she whispered, "some secrets are meant to protect, not destroy." The days that followed were a dance of observation and subtle defiance. Kale watched Alara as she moved through the palace, noting how she treated the servants with respect, how she spoke to the courtiers with quiet intelligence, and how she seemed to notice details that others overlooked. She was not merely surviving in a world designed to swallow her. She was shaping it in small, deliberate ways. One evening, during a rare moment of calm, Kale found himself in the library, where Alara had been reading by candlelight. The scent of old parchment and candle wax filled the room. Kale approached, curious despite himself. "You read often," he observed. Alara looked up, a flicker of amusement in her hidden gaze. "Knowledge is a companion in solitude," she said. "And it teaches us more than obedience ever could." Kale considered her words. In her, he sensed a mind as sharp as any knight in his court, yet a spirit unbroken by fear. It was both unsettling and irresistible. The first tension between them became undeniable when a messenger arrived with urgent news from the northern provinces. Kale summoned Alara to witness the council's deliberations. She observed silently as nobles debated, her eyes catching lies and half-truths that others failed to notice. Kale, impressed despite himself, realized her presence was more than ornamental. She was perceptive, even dangerous in her quiet way. That night, as they walked along the palace balcony overlooking the city, a chill wind swept through, carrying the scent of rain and distant forests. Kale broke the silence. "You are not what I expected," he said, voice low. "And yet I am intrigued." Alara's hands, folded lightly at her sides, twitched slightly. "Intrigue can be dangerous, Your Majesty," she replied, her tone steady. "But sometimes it is the only path to truth." Before Kale could respond, a shadow moved in the courtyard below. A figure knelt, bowing deeply before him. "Your Majesty," the stranger whispered, "she is no mere nobody, and the curse awakens tonight." Kale's eyes narrowed. Alara's hand, hidden beneath her veil, trembled ever so slightly. For a moment the wind seemed to pause, the world holding its breath. Neither spoke as the figure disappeared into the night, leaving only the echo of warning in the cold air. Alone, Kale studied Alara in the moonlight. She lifted her veil just enough to reveal a pair of eyes that shimmered with a light that did not belong entirely to this world. There was a secret there, something ancient and powerful, and Kale felt a stir of both fear and fascination. Alara met his gaze, steady and calm. "There are truths I cannot yet tell," she said softly, "and dangers I must face alone." Kale's expression softened, though his voice remained firm. "You are mine now," he said quietly. "And in Erendor no one faces anything alone, not even a nobody." A tension hung between them, unspoken yet palpable. Neither understood fully what the night would bring, or the secrets hidden beneath her veil. But one thing was certain: nothing in the kingdom would ever be the same again. And somewhere in the shadows, the first whisper of a curse began to stir. The morning after the shadowy warning, the palace of Erendor felt heavier than usual. Mist clung to the stone walls and winding streets, as if the kingdom itself held its breath. King Kale moved through the corridors with his usual precision, yet there was a restless tension in his steps. The words of the stranger haunted him. She is no mere nobody, and the curse awakens tonight." Ilara, meanwhile, had retreated to her private chambers, her veil carefully draped around her shoulders. She had sensed the figure in the courtyard but had remained calm, aware that revealing her powers now would bring more danger than protection. She touched the edge of her veil and whispered under her breath, "Patience. The time will come, but not yet." Kale did not come to her chambers that morning, and yet every glance from his sharp eyes seemed to follow her even in his absence. The court began to notice the subtle change in their dynamic. Ilara was no longer just the silent bride. She moved with quiet authority. Courtiers whispered of her insight and wisdom, noting the careful way she handled even the smallest matters. The day grew heavy with anticipation, and Kale finally summoned Ilara to the council chamber. A long table of nobles waited, their faces filled with curiosity and skepticism. The council had heard rumors of the bride's mysterious origins and had gathered to see if she could withstand the scrutiny of Erendor's political world. Kale remained at the head of the table, his gaze fixed on her. "Observe," he said, his voice steady, "and speak only when necessary, but do not be silent if the truth requires your voice." Ilara stepped forward. The room fell into a hush as she addressed the council. "The northern provinces are in need of guidance," she said, her voice calm. "Resources are scarce and the farmers need support. If we neglect them, the unrest will grow. A measured approach, sending aid and listening to their needs, will secure loyalty more than force ever could." The nobles murmured among themselves. Kale's eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger but in thoughtful consideration. Ilara's insight was subtle yet precise, revealing knowledge beyond her apparent background. He realized that she had observed more than he had assumed and perhaps knew more about Erendor than most of the council. As the council meeting ended, Kale asked her to remain. "You see, Ilara," he said quietly as they left the chamber, "power is more than the strength of arms. You have a keen mind, yet you are still veiled in mystery. Tell me, why hide your true self?" Ilara's hand lightly touched her veil, as if it were both shield and symbol. "Because some truths," she said softly, "cannot be revealed until the moment is right. And some dangers are born from knowledge too early." Kale considered her words. He had spent his life measuring threats, and yet the notion of danger hidden within gentleness was new to him. He began to see her not as a mere bride, but as a force carefully restrained, waiting to be understood. That evening, the palace was quieter than usual. A storm had begun to roll over the mountains to the north, and the first distant rumbles of thunder echoed through the halls. Ilara walked through the corridors alone, her mind filled with thoughts of what had been whispered in the courtyard. She paused by a balcony overlooking the gardens, where the storm's first droplets fell, sparkling in the lantern light. Suddenly, a faint glow appeared in her palm. Ilara froze, feeling the familiar stirring of the ancient magic within her. It had been dormant for so long, waiting, and now it called to her, demanding acknowledgement. She drew a slow breath, reminding herself to remain calm. Kale appeared at the balcony entrance, observing her quietly. "You should not be alone," he said softly. "The night carries more than rain and wind." Ilara lowered her hand, hiding the subtle shimmer. "I am aware," she replied, her tone steady. "But some things must be faced quietly, the storm outside and the one within." Kale stepped closer. The air between them felt charged, not with confrontation but with a quiet intensity neither fully understood. "Storms within," he murmured, "are harder to control than any army." "You carry more than you let on, don't you?" Ilara's eyes met his, her gaze steady beneath the veil. "And yet," she said softly, "we are all bound by secrets, Your Majesty. Some protect, some punish, and some guide us. My secret is no exception." The wind picked up, sweeping rain across the balcony. Kale watched her silently, feeling both curiosity and caution. He sensed the pulse of something extraordinary, a power that might rival his own, yet it did not frighten him, it intrigued him. The following days were a delicate dance of observation and restraint. Kale observed her as she navigated the palace, noting how she spoke with the servants, how she listened to the nobles, and how she reacted to challenges without revealing the full measure of her abilities. She was neither weak nor submissive. She was deliberate, careful, and quietly commanding. One evening, during a private walk through the moonlit gardens, Kale spoke. "Tell me, Alara, do you fear what you carry?" Alara paused, gazing at the silver reflection of the moon in the fountain. "Fear can be a companion," she said softly, "but it does not control me. I have learned to live with what I cannot yet change." Kale's eyes darkened with thought. He had spent his life controlling all that was around him, bending circumstances to his will. To see someone carry such power without yielding to it was unsettling. Yet he could not deny the pull he felt toward her. There was a balance of strength and restraint that challenged him, awakened something long buried in his own heart. Days passed, and the first true test of her secret came without warning. The northern provinces sent urgent news. A sudden blight threatened the harvest and fear spread among the people. Kale called the council, expecting debate and perhaps panic. Alara, however, remained calm. "The harvest may fail," she said, "but panic will destroy more than the blight itself. We must act with care. Distribute the seeds we have saved, send aid to the hardest-hit villages, and let the people know they are not abandoned. Fear spreads faster than any disease. Hope, even small hope, can heal more than force ever could." Kale watched as the nobles reacted with surprise. Her words were simple yet profound, revealing a wisdom that few possessed. He felt a flicker of pride but also an awareness of her depth, a depth he could not yet measure. That night, as the storm returned, Alara felt the stirrings of the curse again. It was stronger now, pulsing with energy she had barely contained before. She retreated to the balcony, hands trembling as she felt the magic respond to her thoughts and emotions. Kale appeared again, silent as a shadow. "The storm calls to you," he observed, voice quiet but firm. Alara nodded, unable to hide the shimmer in her eyes. "It is awakening," she whispered. "I do not fully understand it, yet it listens to me." Kale stepped closer, the rain dripping onto their shoulders. "And if it turns against you?" he asked. Alara shook her head. "It is not my enemy, but it is dangerous, yes. Even controlled, it demands respect." For a long moment they stood in silence, listening to the wind and rain, feeling the tension of power between them. Kale's heart beat faster than he cared to admit. He had faced enemies, armies, and treacheries, but the mystery of Alara and the unseen force within her stirred something unfamiliar, a mixture of awe, caution, and longing. Suddenly, a distant flash of light erupted from the palace garden, and a wave of wind seemed to ripple through the balcony. Alara's veil fluttered, revealing a glimpse of her face, her eyes alight with the magic she barely controlled. Kale reached out instinctively, steadying her with a gentle hand. "You are stronger than you know," he murmured, voice low. Alara's lips parted in a small, almost shy smile, yet her eyes betrayed the struggle within. "Strength is not enough," she said. "Control, understanding, and trust, that is what is needed." Kale's gaze softened, a rare warmth touching his expression. "Then trust me," he said simply, "and I will stand by you no matter what awakens." The first true test of their bond had passed not with battle, but with quiet understanding. Yet as the storm raged on, both knew that the awakening curse was only the beginning. Something ancient and powerful had stirred, and the night whispered of challenges yet to come. As the moon disappeared behind a bank of clouds, Alara lifted her veil fully for the first time, revealing eyes that glowed faintly with the power within her. She turned to Kale, voice steady yet soft. "I do not know all that awaits us," she said, "but I am ready to face it with you." Kale's hand found hers, and for the first time the Alpha King felt the weight of destiny and desire entwined. "Together," he said. And somewhere, deep within the shadowed corners of the palace, A whisper of the past stirred, as if the ancient curse itself had acknowledged that its awakening had begun. The days following the awakening of Alara's magic were unlike any the kingdom of Urindor had known. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sky streaked with gold and violet, and the palace seemed to breathe anew. Whispers traveled quickly through the halls, whispers about the veiled queen who possessed power unseen in generations. Cale found himself watching her more than ever. She moved with the quiet confidence of one who had faced far greater dangers than any court intrigue could offer. Yet there was something fragile beneath that strength, a tension that pulled at him, drawing him closer despite the caution he had cultivated all his life. "Cale," Alara said softly one morning as he entered the sunlit garden, "you watch too closely. Do you not trust me?" Cale smiled faintly, a rare softness in his expression. "It is not distrust," he said, stepping beside her. "It is fascination. You carry a power few can even imagine, and you wield it with such care that it unsettles me, and yet I cannot look away." Alara turned her eyes toward him, the veil lifted for the first time during the day. Sunlight touched her face, revealing eyes that held both wisdom and the faint shimmer of magic. "Power is not always control, Your Majesty," she said. "Sometimes it is the understanding of what must be balanced, emotion, thought, and action. Too much of one can topple the other." Cale nodded slowly. He had spent his life balancing the kingdom with strength and fear, yet he sensed that Alara's approach was different. There was subtlety in her power, a harmony he had never learned to appreciate. And the more he observed her, the more he realized he was drawn not just to her abilities, but to the woman beneath them. The palace became a stage for their quiet connection. Cale would summon her to witness matters of state, and Alara would offer insight, her words measured yet illuminating. The nobles began to notice the unusual shift. The Alpha King, once untouchable, seemed changed. He was less rigid, more contemplative, and often found lingering near her presence, listening as much as he spoke. One evening, under the pale glow of the moon, Cale found Alara in the library. Candles flickered, casting warm shadows across the tall shelves filled with ancient tomes. She was reading a book bound in deep green leather, her fingers tracing the edges of the pages as though touching the thoughts of centuries past. "You are always seeking knowledge," Cale observed, his voice soft. Alara looked up, a faint smile touching her lips. "Knowledge is the companion of understanding," she replied. "And understanding is the first step toward control of oneself and of what surrounds us." Cale moved closer, noting the faint glow that seemed to linger in her eyes. "And what is it you seek to understand?" he asked, genuinely curious. Alara closed the book gently, holding it to her chest. "Myself," she admitted, "and what this power truly means. It is awakening, and yet I do not fully know its limits. I do not wish to harm anyone, but I must learn how to wield it without fear or regret." Cale reached out, placing a hand lightly on hers. The warmth of his touch sent a small tremor through her, and for a moment neither spoke. The library, once quiet and scholarly, seemed to hum with the unspoken connection between them. "You will not face it alone," Cale said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. "Whatever this is, whatever may come, I will stand with you." Alara's lips parted slightly, her heart stirring in a way she had not allowed herself to feel before. "Your trust, it is a gift I am not sure I deserve," she whispered. Cale shook his head. "It is not about deserving," he said. "It is about choosing to believe." That night the palace was alive with subtle tensions. Outside the walls, the wind carried whispers of unease from the northern provinces. Within the palace, nobles watched the growing bond between Cale and Alara with fascination and suspicion. Some admired her wisdom, others feared the magic she held. But all knew that the Alpha King, known for his rigid authority, was being drawn into a new kind of challenge, one that was not of politics or war, but of the heart. The following days tested both Alara's control and Cale's patience. A group of nobles, jealous of the influence she had gained, began subtle attempts to undermine her. They questioned her origins, her insight, and even the motives behind her actions. Yet each time, Alara responded with calm clarity, revealing wisdom that quieted the murmurs without raising her voice. Kale noticed this, and with each encounter, he found himself more in awe of her. Her strength was quiet, deliberate, and far more commanding than any display of force. And yet she remained humble, aware that her power was not meant for domination, but for balance. One evening, Kale summoned her to the throne room. Candles lined the walls and the air was heavy with expectation. "Alara," he began, "tonight we will speak honestly, not as king and queen, not as ruler and subject, but as something in between. I need to understand you, and I suspect you wish to understand me." Alara inclined her head. "I do," she said simply. They spoke for hours, the conversation moving from the affairs of state to memories of childhood, to hopes and fears. Kale shared glimpses of the loneliness that had shaped him, the weight of responsibility that had hardened his heart. Alara spoke of her past, carefully avoiding the details of her power, yet revealing enough to show her courage and resilience. As the night deepened, a subtle shift occurred. The bond between them grew, not with passion alone, but with trust and understanding. Kale, who had never allowed himself such vulnerability, felt a strange lightness. And Alara, who had spent her life guarding herself, felt a warmth that made her powers shimmer faintly, almost responding to her emotions. But the peace was not to last. A faint ripple of energy pulsed through the palace, emanating from the ancient corridors where few dared to tread. Alara stiffened, sensing the magic that had begun to stir more strongly than before. "The curse," she whispered, more to herself than to Kale. Kale noticed the change instantly. "What is it?" he asked, stepping closer. Alara's hands trembled slightly. "It is awakening fully," she said. "I can feel it now more than ever. It is not dangerous to you yet, but it is alive, and it is waiting." Kale's gaze softened, a rare mixture of awe and caution in his eyes. "Then we will face it together," he said firmly. That night, as the moon hung low over the palace, the first true manifestation of Alara's magic appeared. She stood in the private courtyard, the air around her shimmering with energy that responded to her heartbeat. Kale arrived without hesitation, placing himself beside her. "You are not alone," he said softly. Alara took a deep breath, focusing on the power within her. Light danced around her hands, moving in patterns that felt both beautiful and dangerous. She closed her eyes, letting the magic flow naturally without restraint. Kale watched, fascinated and cautious. The energy was magnificent, like a living storm contained within a fragile form. And yet there was no fear in her, only purpose and determination. When the display ended, the air was calm once more, yet charged with a sense of possibility. Alara opened her eyes, meeting Kale's gaze. "It is stronger than before," she admitted. "But I feel clearer, more capable, perhaps even ready." Kale nodded, a quiet smile playing at his lips. "You are extraordinary," he said, "and I am honored to stand with you." For the first time, Alara allowed herself to smile freely, feeling a warmth she had long denied herself. "Then perhaps the awakening is not a curse," she said softly, "but a beginning." Kale took her hand in his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Beginnings can be the most dangerous and the most beautiful," he said. As they stood together under the moonlight, the palace around them seemed to hum with anticipation. Somewhere in the shadows, a presence watched silently, a reminder that the awakening was only the first step. Challenges lay ahead, tests of power, trust, and love. But in that moment, Kale and Alara had discovered a new balance, a shared strength born of understanding and unspoken connection. The night ended not with conflict, but with quiet promise. They returned to the palace, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions, hearts beating in sync. For the first time, both understood that power and passion could coexist, that love could temper fear, and that trust could transform even the coldest of hearts. Yet as they fell into a rare, peaceful sleep, a whisper of the past stirred in the distant corridors of the palace. The ancient curse had awakened fully, and the story of Alara, the veiled queen, and Kale, the Alpha King, was only beginning. The world outside Erendor waited, and with it, secrets, challenges, and a destiny that neither of them could yet fully grasp. The dawn broke over Erendor with an unusual stillness, the sun rising in golden streaks that cut through the misty air. In the palace, a quiet tension hung like a veil over every corridor, every hall. Kale stood at the highest balcony, staring at the awakening city below. He had sensed it in his dreams, in the pulse of the kingdom, the stirrings of something ancient, something waiting to be confronted. Alara approached quietly, her steps soft against the stone. The veil she once wore had long been discarded, revealing her full presence. Eyes shimmering with subtle light, hands that carried power, yet gestures gentle as a breeze. Kale turned, meeting her gaze, and in that silent moment the weight of all they had endured and all they would face passed between them. "The curse, it is stronger now," she said softly. "I can feel its presence everywhere, in the palace, the city, even in the people. It is as though the kingdom itself responds to it." Kale reached for her hand, holding it firmly. "Then we will face it together," he said. "Whatever comes, we do not falter alone." Alara nodded, drawing strength from his steady presence. She had spent so long guarding her secret, hiding the power that could shape the fate of Erendor. Now, fully awakened, she felt the responsibility pressing upon her, but not as a burden. She felt it as a purpose. The first challenge came unexpectedly. A soft ripple of energy pulsed through the palace, not destructive, but insistent, as though demanding attention. Alara closed her eyes, focusing, sensing the patterns beneath the surface. Magic, alive and ancient, responded to her heartbeat, intertwining with her thoughts and emotions. "This is it," she murmured. "The heart of the curse." Kale stood close, silent but attentive, sensing the subtle tremor in the air, the quiet urgency of the unseen force. "Then show me," he said. "Let me stand with you, whatever this reveals." Alara's hands glowed faintly as she extended them toward the center of the courtyard. The air shimmered, bending light, folding around her in a gentle storm of energy. Patterns of ancient symbols emerged, swirling with a rhythm that echoed through the palace walls. It was beautiful and intimidating, the pulse of a power that had slept for centuries. Kale watched, awestruck. He had faced enemies, schemes, and rebellions, but never a force like this, alive, intelligent, and yet responsive to the courage of one human being. "It listens to me," Alara whispered, her voice steady yet tinged with wonder. "It responds to my will, but it tests my heart." Kale stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Then let it test us together," he said. "I trust you, and I trust us." A ripple of light shot through the courtyard, swirling around them in patterns of silver and violet. The magic responded not just to Alara's power, but to the bond she shared with Kale. The ancient curse, once threatening, now seemed to bend to something deeper: love, trust, and understanding. Alara felt her heart swell, a mixture of fear and hope. "It is changing," she whispered, "not because I command it, but because it recognizes what we share." Kale's eyes softened, and he took her hand fully in his, holding it close to his chest. "Then let it guide us," he said quietly. For hours they worked together in silence, letting the magic flow through them like a river. Alara guided the currents, Kale offering strength and calm. Slowly, the force that had been a curse transformed into something protective, almost benevolent. The palace walls glowed faintly, the gardens shimmered in colors untouched by sunlight, and the city beyond seemed to breathe with a sense of renewal. At last the energy settled, leaving a quiet glow in the air. Alara sank to her knees, exhausted but triumphant. Kale knelt beside her, lifting her hand gently to his lips. "You have done it," he said softly. "Not just faced the curse, but changed it. You are extraordinary." Alara smiled, a mixture of relief and awe. It was never about power alone, she said. It was about balance, understanding, and trust. Without you, I could not have done this. Kale shook his head. You could have done it alone, he said firmly. But I am honored to stand beside you, and now we have something new. Not just a kingdom saved, but a connection that cannot be broken. The palace, once heavy with tension and uncertainty, now felt lighter, alive with a sense of possibility. The nobles who had once whispered doubts now observed in silent admiration, witnessing the quiet transformation that had taken place, not just in the queen, but in the king as well. Days passed, and Erendor began to feel the effects of Alara's awakening. The northern provinces, once threatened by blight and unrest, now flourished under her careful guidance. Farmers and citizens alike spoke of the veiled queen who had appeared mysteriously, bringing hope and renewal. Kale watched with pride and admiration, recognizing that her strength and insight had changed the very heart of the kingdom. Yet even in victory, there were still challenges. Ancient forces, curious and cautious, lingered in the shadows, whispering of tests yet to come. Alara felt their presence, subtle but persistent, as though the world itself was acknowledging her transformation. One evening, she and Kale walked through the palace gardens, bathed in the soft glow of lanterns. The night was calm, filled with the quiet hum of life and magic intertwined. "Do you ever fear what comes next?" Kale asked softly, his hand brushing hers. Alara considered this. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but fear is not weakness. It is a reminder that we are alive, that we care. And now I have something stronger than fear, trust. In you, in myself, and in what we can face together." Kale's gaze softened, and he lifted her hand to his lips once more. "Then we are ready," he said. "For whatever may come, we face it as one." The months that followed were filled with quiet transformation. Alara's powers grew with guidance but never unchecked. She learned to weave magic into daily life, healing, nurturing, and strengthening the kingdom. Kale, once distant and commanding, now led with a heart softened by understanding, guided by the quiet strength of the woman he loved. Their love, once tempered by uncertainty, now became a steady flame. They shared long conversations in the palace library, walks through moonlit gardens, and quiet moments on balconies overlooking the kingdom. Each day revealed new layers of trust, connection, and understanding. One afternoon, as they stood atop the highest tower, gazing at the horizon where mountains met the sky, Alara turned to Kale. "The curse is no longer a threat," she said softly. "It has become part of me, part of us, and with it, a promise that we can shape the future together." Kale nodded, his eyes reflecting both admiration and love. "You have changed everything," he said. "Not just the kingdom, not just me, but the way we see what is possible. You are no nobody. You are the heart of Erendor." Alara's lips curved into a gentle smile. "And you," she replied, "are the strength that lets me be who I am. Together we are more than king and queen. We are equals bound by trust and purpose." As the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting the city in warm gold and purple, a soft ripple of light shimmered in the palace gardens. The ancient magic, once a curse, now lingered as a protective presence, gentle and watchful. It had recognized them, their bond, and the balance they had created. Kale lifted Alara into his arms, spinning her gently in a moment of joy that neither had allowed themselves before. Laughter, light and free, echoed through the tower, carrying across the city like a promise. "You are mine, truly," Kale whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "And you are mine," Alara replied, eyes shining with affection and certainty. Yet even as peace settled over Erendor, both knew the world would continue to test them. Ancient powers slept in corners beyond the city, whispers of old magic stirred in forgotten places, and destiny, ever persistent, watched closely. But they were ready. Together they had faced awakening, trust, and transformation. Together they would face whatever came next. As the moon rose, spilling silver light over the palace towers, Kale and Alara stood side by side, looking out over the kingdom they had saved and the life they had begun. The past, with its shadows and secrets, had shaped them, but it no longer controlled them. They were free, free to love, to lead, and to embrace the magic and destiny that intertwined them. And in the distance, faint but certain, a shimmer of light hinted that the story of the Veiled Queen and the Alpha King was only the beginning of a legend that would be whispered for generations.